Hello friends and welcome. Katie here from Eastwick's Paper and Ink. Thanks so much for joining me today. And welcome to INKtoberfest. We're almost at the end of the month and I'm excited to share some monochromatic stamping. Now, for those of you that may not know, monochromatic just simply means one color. So I picked a couple of colors to get us started and get your creative juices flowing. I'm going to start off with something pretty simple. I've got some snow flurries, some clear embossing powder, some clear ink, and the Peony Sketch stamp set from Maker Forte and Alex Iberia. I'm going to start off by stamping on a piece of heavyweight vellum and treating that with an anti-static powder tool. And I'm going to use the new Snowflake white pigment ink to stamp, and then I'll use some of that clear embossing powder to seal it in, if you will. And vellum, there's certain inks that you can use to stamp with, that'll dry really quickly. Pigment ink isn't one of them. So using a clear embossing powder to seal in your color, in this case the white pigment ink, is definitely a must to keep your image clean. Now I'm going to fussy cut this. I'm really not one to fussy cut, so I did speed this up like 4 times, but it was simple enough, to where there wasn't too much ins and outs to be able to get a nice close-up cut of this peony. Now what I'm doing is I thought that I would show you a basic. Everybody knows monochromatic with either blacks and whites or grays, blacks, whites. And so I thought I would show you one way that you can achieve the black and white look. And so using vellum helps. Now I will say that I'm going to use it's Gorilla's clear foam tape. It's a double-sided adhesive, but it's like foam, so it's a bit thicker. And I'm only going to use a small square, but I'm also going to I cut out another piece of vellum. I'm adding some of this On Point liquid glue. And I like the On Point glue because it really is great for vellum. Now I only put it around the edges because I just really needed to put it together. Quickly, I'm going to stamp these leaves from the Sketch Peony set onto the Eclipse black cardstock with some white pigment ink, and then I'll seal that in again with clear embossing powder. And the reason that I did this was because pigment ink takes a while to dry, and so sealing it in with the clear embossing ink really does let you move forward in the project. You don't have to sit around and wait for it to dry. You don't have to worry if you're going to smudge it. I heat set that, and now I'm just taking a soft cloth and buffing off that anti-static powder, which is just kaolin clay powder, to clean that powder off the cardstock. Now that tape that I talked about, the reason I doubled up my vellum was because the foam tape is still going to show through. Even though it's a clear foam tape, you can still kind of see a shadowing of it. And by doubling up your vellum, it really does help to cover any adhesive that you might, even if you're using liquid adhesive. I wanted to pop it up a little bit, but even if you're using clear liquid adhesive, it will still show through sometimes with vellum. Now I heat embossed, did the same. White pigment ink, heat set that with clear embossing powder with that Sending Hugs sentiment, and then just a heavyweight white card base, and that finishes up this card. So really quick, easy, simple monochromatic card using white pigment ink. Now I'm going to come in with Everglades, and I'm just going to use some creative corners to stamp Ho 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 from, let me find my stamp sets, the Build a Modern Christmas stamp set. Now I love this stamp set because it's got all kinds of holiday sentiments in there. And I wanted to do something different because I'm going to cut this out, as you probably saw in the photos in the beginning, with an arch die. But again, we're monochromatic. So really when it comes to monochromatic card making, it makes it simple. It takes a lot of the guesswork out because you're using only one color. So you can do a plain white card base, right? Or cardstock, depending on what your size is, because if you want to layer it, you're going to make a smaller, panel. And one color. So you could do just this white and green, which is what I did. Now, as we get further along in the video, I'm going to show you more of a tone on tone, but it's still monochromatic because you're still using the same color, right? So we've got our ho 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 stamped out, and once I get that finished, we'll die cut with the arches. Now I'm showing you that I've got a piece of clear acetate that I'm using because sometimes I clean the stamp off, but sometimes I don't get it totally clean. Here I'm going to die cut that into an arch shape. And then I'm going to create a frame, but that acetate helps to protect and keep your stamping clean when you're using those creative corners in case you don't get your stamp perfectly clean. So I'm using a couple of those. These layering arches are from Spellbinders. I love the fact that there's so many in there. And they're a good, I think they're like a 1/4 inch apart, size wise. So you get quite a bit of dies, which is great. So I'm going to cut, I debated. I tried a couple different things. I tried the Everglades cardstock to create an arch, and I tried white, and I tried layering the green and the white, and I didn't love it. So I just stuck with the white. And for busy backgrounds, and you're going to notice this for 2 more cards that are going to be coming up. For busy backgrounds, and especially when you're doing tone on tone, monochromatic, your sentiments can get lost, right? And so I'm going to show you a little trick that by using frames of any kind, any shape, it will bring your eye into focus wherever you have your sentiment, wherever you want that focus to be. So just using my paper trimmer, I'm going to separate these 2 sentiments so that I can kind of side stack them within the arch. And I love that Maker Forte has coordinating cardstock for some of their inks. So this is Everglades ink and heavyweight white cardstock that we're using, and they have an Everglades cardstock. So it made it really easy to be able to pair these together to continue that monochromatic theme. Remember, one color. You're always going to have a secondary color, whether it's white or black, but if you stick with just your ink as your main color, so in this case we're doing Everglades ink, Color Hive ink, and we have a coordinating cardstock in Everglades, then you're keeping with that theme, right? Same with the reds, yellows, pinks, purples, anything. You can do it with anything. Now, I had some scrap cardstock. I wanted to pop this up. I don't have any foam. So if you have foam tape, you've got foam panels or something, you can use that instead. But I'm just using some scrap cardstock to create some dimension. It's about 4 layers to be able to pop my arch up. Excuse me. And once I get that down, just using liquid adhesive, and then I will add that to my A2 card base, which is Everglades. And you see just that simple arch brings that Merry Christmas sentiment into focus. So you can read the background, but you're able to bring your eye down with that arch in there to read Merry Christmas. It makes it really cool, really simple and easy. And this is a dark card base, so I'll stick a piece of white cardstock in the inside. Now I'm moving on to the Holly Berries stamp set, and I really like this stamp set. So I'm going to show you a couple different things. So I talked about that tone on tone earlier. Again, it's similar to monochromatic because tone on tone, you're going to use the same ink color. Now you could technically use like a Versamark ink, a clear embossing ink to create a tone on tone. But in this case, you can do it with your stamps. The thing that I'll mention, that dye inks tend to dry back they soften as they dry back. Okay, so I would definitely ink it up a couple of times at least. So that's what I did here. I stamped the Everglades ink on the Everglades cardstock a couple of times, rotating my cardstock and flipping it around so I can get the other corner. And once I get that done, I will, because we're kind of limited in space, right, in the center there, because that's where I'm going to put my sentiment, being that these holly leaves are, pretty big. They take up quite a bit of space. So we're going to ink up our Holly Jolly from the same stamp set, Holly Berries, and again, inking up a couple of times with the Everglades. And I'm just using my finger. These stamps are new, so I haven't had a chance to use them yet. But inking it up a couple times gives it a nice deep color saturation, so you're not going to lose that color. It's not going to fade back in to the cardstock. So taking one of the other stamps within that Holly Berries stamp set and going to fill in the corners. So that's why I stamped my sentiment first, so that I could have an idea of where I wanted to fill and which one, because there's actually several Holly Berries branch leaves stamps within that stamp set to be able to fill that in. So now I will ink that up one more time. Again, just stamp a couple of times. It doesn't take a lot. And I also created a slimline card that I was testing out because I wasn't sure, sometimes, as you can see here, you don't know how things are going to turn out, right? So I figured, well, let's make a little slimline. We'll test it out. But remember that frame, any shape, any frame that I was talking about? Using some rectangle dies, layering rectangle dies, you can create a frame, and that brings your focus right into the center where you want your eye to look. And the same with this slimline, and of course that Have a Holly Jolly Christmas comes from that same Holly Berry stamp set. Now I used some double-sided adhesive and I added some liquid glue because there's literally like an 1/8 of an inch border from our main panel to our card base, so I needed to make sure I had some room to wiggle it around and make sure everything got lined up correctly. And here's our A2 size card, and I think it's just the cutest. I love that tone-on-tone look. A little dark, I'll give you that, but it's a great monochromatic card without always having to revert to black and white. And here's our slimline, and again, a little 1/8 of an inch border to give us that layered white, blue, or white, green, and white. Excuse me. Layering. Now, this is telephone box there at the top and Independence there that I just showed you when I flipped the panel around. I wanted you to see the difference in those two colored inks because Independence is a bit more orangey and telephone box is a bit deeper red, which I prefer personally. Now I'm doing this, I'm showing you how to color your own cardstock. There's lots of ways. You can ink blend it. You could do what I'm doing with the brayer, right? You can ink smush to color your cardstock. So if you don't have a coordinating cardstock like we did there with Everglades, you can make your own. And in fact, I very rarely buy coordinating cardstocks. I tend to lean towards the basics: black, gray, white, maybe a good navy, good dark blue, maybe a soft blue, but I don't have a ton of colored cardstock in my stash. Reds are an exception because it's my favorite color. But I don't buy a ton of colored cardstock because I have the inks. I can make my own, right? And so I find that doing ink blending or smushing or using the brayer to color my cardstock just saves me a little bit of money, right? So with coloring your own cardstock, of course, you're automatically going to have the exact color of your ink, right? To be able to create that monochromatic look. And so here, again, I'm adding another frame. I cut a bunch of those frames out when I did the first one for the Holly Jolly card. And as I was inking up, I kept, inking up to deepen up that color. Just remember, the more that you stamp your ink, pad, the darker your color is going to get. So you can you're always going to be able to change up the way that an ink looks the more you stamp it, or the least amount of times you stamp it, right? So as I was doing that, I was like, we can make another card. I got a panel here. Let's make an eclipse card with it that can be monochromatic. What I want you to start thinking is that your cards don't have to be basic when it comes to monochromatic, right? Even though you're using one color, you can, I kept them pretty basic here, right? With just doing some frames and some simple stamping, but you can use your dies to cut, your cardstock. Of course, you can color your cardstock, use your dies, add some greenery, dress them up a little bit if you want to add a little bit more layer to it. Just use one color. And of course, if you're ink smushing, maybe don't put as much ink down, right? Or water it down a little bit more, and you're going to get a softer color payoff, right? Or if you want a deeper color payoff, you just keep building up that color when you're ink smushing, or you're using your brayer or your ink blending. So there's lots of different ways that you can get variations in one color, depending on what it is that you're going to do. My focus today here was stamping, so I wanted to keep it simple, but there are lots of different ways that you can stretch out your inks. Dye inks are better because they're water-based versus pigment inks, but you certainly could get away with it with pigment inks. They just take a little bit longer to dry. They're more of a surface ink. Which is why I heat set with clear embossing powder, the white pigment ink, the snow flurries. So now I'm going to take a Merry Christmas sentiment that comes from the Build a Modern Christmas and set that up within the frame. I added the frame in there to make sure that it would fit. And again, we've got one color. We've got to stamp a sentiment that's going to be the same color, right? Now, I had to re-ink my ink pad, and so you can see where it really kind of spread out that Merry Christmas and made the letters really fat. But by putting that frame in, it brings your focus in. Not so much here on the white because, you have that space with the white space, but on this particular card, you can see, and also on the Holly Jolly with the green holly berries, that frame really brings your focus into the center. So it makes being able to use one color a lot easier. And so now I'm going to line my eclipse frame, if you will, up onto our poinsettias. Now this stamp set here is the poinsettia stamp set, collab with Maker Forte and Alex Siberia. And that completes our cards. And I love how these all turned out. It gives me a little build of holiday cards to get the Christmas season going. I did the one sending hugs, just kind of get your brain flowing and your creativity flowing on the main thing of monochromatic that people recognize. But that finishes it up. I hope you guys have enjoyed Inktober. I had a blast creating this video and sharing my ideas with you. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Be sure and check the description box below. It's going to have all the products used. And don't forget to subscribe to the Hedgehog Hollow. And if you would, my channel, Eastwick's Paper and Ink. And hang out with us. We love to see what you guys are doing, and we love to share our makes with you guys. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you in the next video.